ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون ولقد همت به وهم بها لولا أن رأى برهان ربه كذلك لنصرف عنه السوء والفحشاء إنه من عبادنا المخلصين واستبق الباب وقدت قميصه من دبر وألف يا سيدها لدى الباب قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم قال هي راودتني عن نفسي وشهد شاهد من أهلها إن كان قميصه قد من قبل فصدقت وهو من الكاذبين وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين فلما رأى قميصه قد من دبر قال إنه من كيدكن إن كيدكن عظيم يوسف أعرض عن هذا واستغفري لذنبك إنك كنت من الخاطئين وقال نسوة في المدينة امرأة العزيز تراود فتاها عن نفسه قد شغفها حبا إنا لنراها في ضلال مبين فلما سمعت بمكرهن أرسلت إليهن وأعتدت لهن متكئا وآتت كل واحدة منهن سكينا وقالت اخرج عليهن فلما رأينه أكبرنه وقطعن أيديهن وقلن حاش لله ما هذا بشرا إن هذا إلا ملك كريم قالت فذلكن الذي لمتنني فيه ولقد راودته عن نفسه فاستعصم ولئن لم يفعل ما آمره ليسجنن وليكون من الصاغرين قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه وإلا تصرف عني كيدهن أصب إليهن وأكن من الجاهلين فاستجاب له ربه فصرف عنه كيدهن إنه هو السميع العليم ثم بدا لهم من بعد ما رأوا الآيات ليسجننه حتى حين ودخل معه السجن فتيان قال أحدهما إني أراني أعصر خمرا وقال الآخر إني أراني أحمل فوق رأسي خبزا تأكل الطير منه نبئنا بتأويله إنا نراك من المحسنين قال لا يأتيكما طعام ترزقانه إلا نبأتكما بتأويله قبل أن يأتيكما ذلكما مما علمني ربي إني تركت ملة قوم لا يؤمنون بالله وهم بالآخرة هم كافرون واتبعت ملة آبائي إبراهيم وإسحاق ويعقوب ما كان لنا أن نشرك بالله من شيء ذلك من فضل الله علينا وعلى الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار ما تعبدون من دونه إلا أسماء سميتموها أنتم وآباؤكم ما أنزل الله بها من سلطان إن الحكم إلا لله أمر أن لا تعبدوا إلا إياه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون يا صاحبي السجن أما أحدكما فيسقي ربه خمرا وأما الآخر فيصلب فتأكل الطير من رأسه قضي الأمر الذي فيه تستفتيان وقال للذي ظن أنه ناج منهما اذكرني عند ربك فأنساه الشيطان ذكر ربه فلبث في السجن بضع سنين وقال الملك إني أرى 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف وسبع
All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining us today. It is February 12th. We are joining the African American Muslim Alliance for Establishing Islam in America. Conversations with Black Muslim Pioneers. Today, we are more than happy and blessed to be have a conversation today with Ustada bin Hamid Ali. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host and husband, Alhamdulillah, Shahid, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, I'm the founder, Sister Shakira, and we'll turn it over.
All right, alhamdulillah, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Thank you guys for coming to the AAMA, African American Muslim Alliance of Tampa Bay's interview of the Black pioneers here in America. A little bit about us. Let me scroll this up a little bit. A little bit about us. Mission statement: AAMA is the central point of contact for the collective representatives of African American Muslims in Tampa Bay. Our NIA is to create Islamically safe environments that welcome and enrich the social, physical, financial, and mental welfare of the African American Muslims, thereby making us better equipped to practice our deen individually, in our families, and be an example in societies that teaches others, Muslims and non-Muslims, about Islam. We can be reached at aama.tampabay@gmail.com. I have the pleasure today to have with us Ustad Abdullah ibn Hamid Ali. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you doing?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Brother Shahid, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, doing well. Read a little bit about you. Dr. Abdullah ibn Hamid Ali, an associate professor of Islamic and prophetic tradition at Zaytuna College. This is in Berkeley, California. He holds a PhD in, give me 1 second. So, Shakira, can you make that a little bit larger? There's a little bit that I'm missing on the side. He holds a PhD in cultural and historic studies in religion. He achieved that in 2016, and a MA in ethics and social theology. This was achieved in 2012 from the Graduate Theological Union. He obtained his BA, his Ijaza Ulya in Islamic law, Sharia, from the prestigious Al-Qarawaan University in Fez, Morocco in 2001. He serves as a full-time Islamic chaplain, or he served as a full-time Islamic chaplain to the State Correctional Institute of Chester, Pennsylvania from 2002 to 2007, and is the founding director of Lamppost Education Initiative. His research interests include the interconnection between law and
Identity formation. Identity formation.
Okay, identity formation, comparative Islamic law, and Islam's role in the modern world. So without further ado, alhamdulillah, we have brother, or do you want me to call you brother, doctor, Ustad? I don't know.
Whatever is comfortable with you. Call
Okay, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So I'll say brother, because that's, you know, Abdullah bin Hamid Ali. Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My wife knows this is a pleasure for me. I really do appreciate you coming here today. So we're just gonna kick things off, just starting, and I don't know your history early on in Islam, whether you were born into Islam or you converted to Islam. So a little bit of your history.
Yeah, well, my parents, my mother and father, may they rest in peace. The two of them had entered through the Nation of Islam, we call the First Resurrection, and around the 50s, perhaps even earlier than that. You know, at least I know my mother, she entered into the Nation of Islam. She was 17, around that age. And eventually they met one another. They were married. They followed the teachings of Elijah Muhammad, and then eventually, when he passed away, they transitioned with Imam Dawdi Muhammad, may Allah have mercy on him, into mainstream Sunni Islam. But we were not really raised, I guess you would say, as Sunni Muslims, or perhaps even as Muslims. My older siblings, they did definitely receive the normal training in the Nation of Islam. They would go to the schools, they went to summer camps, things like that, and we go to the temple. But by the time I was born, by the time Elijah Muhammad, he died in 75, I was born a few years before that. Yeah, and so me and my two younger sisters, we really didn't have that much exposure to the Nation of Islam, the ideology or the doctrine itself, but we were largely raised more like cultural Muslims, in the sense that we really didn't know much about Islam other than Assalamu alaikum, of course, the way that we said it, here, and that was about it, that we were Muslims. And so other than that, we were like other regular American kids, or black American kids in the country, and perhaps even Christian kids, right? In that sense, not, we weren't Christians, we knew we weren't that, so we didn't go to church, but we grew up with the same sort of influences, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty Snowman, things like that. The Grinch Stole Christmas, and we would travel from Chicago to Philadelphia every year to my aunt's house, who lived in Philadelphia, and she would buy everybody in the family gifts. So even though we were Muslims, identified with Islam, we clearly weren't Christians, but that's the way we were raised. So when people ask me the question often, like, okay, did you convert to Islam? I always tell them it's complicated, because when I was 15, even though I had already been practicing Islam to that point, I did go to the masjid and I gave shahada, right? I told them that I wanted to openly profess my acceptance of Islam, because there was some conversation, some debate about whether or not being a member, or the children of members of the Nation of Islam, actually constitutes a true sort of conversion experience. Right? So, and I wanted to just make sure that it was clear to everyone else that, that I'm committed to true Islam, right? So that's, in a nutshell, sort of how things sort of started to develop.
Okay, I tell that to a lot of my friends as well. I kind of grew up with the same background. We grew up, there was a picture of Elijah Muhammad in the house, even though my dad did not, outwardly practice with the Nation of Islam, but we grew up culturally Muslim. The most we knew about the Quran was, if you thought your siblings was telling a lie, you're going to swear on the Quran. That was, that was it. That was the, until we actually started to, I grew up in the first Cleveland Masjid in Cleveland, until we actually started to really study and go to the masjid on a consistent basis. So, so you grew up in Chicago, you said?
Yeah, I spent first 10 to 11 years of my life in Chicago, but I was born in Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia, and right after that, my family moved to Chicago. But then we returned when I was close to 11 years old, But yeah, we lived in Chicago, South Side, 122nd and Princess Street, right across the street from West Pullman Park, for those who are familiar with Chicago. And so it is definitely a major part of my life's cherished memories, so in the sense that, when I moved to Philadelphia, of course, I was proud to be from Chicago, so, and then sometimes I go back to Chicago and people say things, I say, well, I'm from Philly, right? So, yeah. Right. So it's really interesting, so that sort of dynamic sort of works there.
Northern city beefs.
Right.
Yeah. So the question that I have, okay, so what we've been doing in the interviews before for the last 11 days is kind of just seeing the different forms of Islam that manifest in the United States, and how, as African Americans, how we got to where we are today. So when you were wanting to take your Shahada again and reaffirm, was there any other pulls from any of these other movements or understandings of Islam that kind of were pulling you this way, or the other way?
I wouldn't, no, not really. I mean, my friends, for much of my youth, in particular, after I left Chicago and moved to Philadelphia, most of my friends were Muslims, right? So,
Okay.
so which meant that both the good and the bad, right? That we did all together, right? So,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, right. So once we moved to Philadelphia, after maybe a year or two, I was a break dancer, coming from Chicago, and then Philly. I continued to do my break dancing, and then eventually as a crew of guys who discovered me. One day I was out in the middle of the street, break dancing all by myself, and so they asked me to join their break dance crew. So I went with them, and then eventually we started to go around the neighborhood to try to find guys to battle. And so eventually,
a lot of young people don't know about them breakdancing games of the 80s.
Yeah, right. So eventually we come across this one group, which had some Muslim members in it, and actually turned out they lived right around the corner from my house. And their mom had discovered that I was Muslim, so she invited me in, on one particular battle. Sort of, she told me, "Oh, he's a Muslim, invite him in," So, and this was pretty much either it was early in my mother and father's divorce, and so my father had moved out by this time. But I did remember that he was the only one in the family who actually made salah, right? So we just remember that, that at certain times you got to be quiet, Dad's praying. And I remember the way that he would pray, but he never made it an obligation upon us to do what he did. And I think that had a lot to do with perhaps feeling betrayed by the nation, right? And he didn't want to us to sort of follow him in any misguidance if it turned out again he was wrong. At least that's just my assumption, right? But I went into their house and I saw someone was praying and making salah, and that itself attracted me. So I started to come around after that, and I would learn the basics, wudu, salah, things like that. This is the house where I saw my very first Quran. I had never seen a Quran in my own house, but it was the first time I saw an all Arabic Quran. And when I saw the Arabic language, I was just fascinated by it. And I was like, well, that really actually says something. I said, SubhanAllah, that says something, and I just wanted to learn it then once I saw it. So it really sort of started that way. And eventually my breakdance crew, they thought I was a traitor, thought I sort of changed sides, as a turncoat, so they were certain guys wanted to fight me after that, so, oh, he with them now. I said, no, I'm not with anybody. I'm just going around there to learn my religion.
Yeah.
But eventually what happened is that they pushed me all the way over, they assumed I was on their side. So I said, okay, I'm on their side now. Right. So,
okay. You learned your Islam from a rival crew.
Right, exactly. Right. So, yeah. So that's, I guess I was sort of like a deserter or something like that. And at any rate, alhamdulillah, that was very good that came from that. And, so really, it wasn't so much of like being influenced by some particular brand of Islam, right, at the time, because like I said, all my friends, they were just, they were born Muslims, they were Sunnis, but they weren't practicing, I wouldn't say. They were really practicing Islam, so it was just more like, hey, we pray, we make salat sometimes, we go out and get high and do all this, you do things that, you do. Yeah. And then eventually I decided that, it was time for a change and I needed to get serious about what I believe in and what I'm supposed to be practicing. And then
around what age was this?
Probably around like 16, around that age. And what really sparked it was seeing that Quran, seeing the Mus'haf, right? I think that's really which really started, seeing the Mus'haf, and then also seeing copies of Yusuf Ali translation with the Arabic next to the English. And I was just so mesmerized with it, and I wanted to learn the language so bad. So I found this book called Easy Tajweed, and the inside cover of the book there was a section on the Arabic alphabet. and how to link the letters, things like that. Yeah. So I bought a notebook, or I got a notebook from somewhere, and I started to write out the letters like 15 times each because I wanted to memorize them.
Okay.
And then within a span of 2 weeks, I would say, somebody came to me and say, "Hey, there's a new teacher at Sister Claire Muhammad School, right? Is there, a teacher from Eritrea, a man we known in the city as Imam Barra." Imam actually is not a title. That was actually his name, Imam, right? Barra. And he was a very well-known traveling teacher, right? That he just very passionate about teaching Arabic. If he found out that somebody was interested, he'll come all the way from one side of the city to the other side of the city. He pay his own way.
That's
right.
Awesome.
And he'll just charge you $5 an hour. He say $5 an hour for my classes. And, and he did that. A lot of people had learned from him at the time, but he was teaching twice a week, I think it was, at night at Sister Claire Muhammad School. Right. So I just went and jumped into his class, and I studied with him for probably a solid year.
Okay.
And then eventually we reached a point where he lacked the ability to, I guess you would say, impart new knowledge to me, right? Because of this limitations, language limitations, right? English was okay, right? But it wasn't like, enough to actually get me to the next level, right? And around that time, across the street from Sister Claire Muhammad is another masjid, at the time was known as the International Muslim Brotherhood, with Sheikh Nahir Mohayman, and there were his sons, Sheikh Anwar and Imam Anas Mohayman, who are still there today. Now they changed the title to the Quba Institute. And so I started to go there to learn basics of Islam as well. And then eventually they started a very new Arabic class, right? And once they started this new class and they were promoting it as like a very special way of teaching Arabic, right? And they had their own book. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to jump ship and I'm going to go learn from these American scholars who spent years of their lives over in Saudi Arabia, memorizing the Quran, and they knew Arabic and they knew English too, which was the biggest boom in itself, right? So I said, okay, well, I'm gonna have to let go of my old teacher, and I'm gonna now have this new teacher. Meanwhile, I was still studying in a lot of other ways, in that anytime I would find that there's another teacher somewhere, I would go and I would, try to get more knowledge from that person. I would use different books. I would spend a lot of time just self-study at home, from, wake up early in the morning from maybe 9:30 and then going on to like 2 o'clock, and just in my room going through books, grammar books, things like that. And there were some other people who I actually studied with at the same time. And then years were moving forward, and then eventually there was a word had reached us that in Fairfax, Virginia, that there was an institute which was opened up by the Saudis, which English translates, the title or the name of the institute would be the Institute of the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Sciences in America, Ma'had al-Ulum al-Arabiyya wa Islamiyya fi America, right? So basically, me and a group of brothers on the weekends, in particular in the summers, we would drive down there, and they would spend the weekends there, to go study.
How old were you around at this time?
I'm trying to remember how old I probably would have been. I probably been, I guess, like 18, 19 around this time. Right.
So from the first time that you saw that Arabic writing, your spark for knowledge it created, I mean, what today for a lot of us is just a flame that we all kind of warm ourselves from, but just seeing that Arabic just created that spark for knowledge for you.
Right, yeah, no, definitely, and of course, I think my years may be off a little bit, in terms of like when exactly that occurred. That actually may have happened when I was a little bit older. Because in 1993, I actually made Hajj.
Okay.
and I don't think my Arabic was a bit less advanced than when I made Hajj 93. So the visit to Fairfax was actually after Hajj, right? So I was a little bit older, so I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
So that's really
Well, I'll
great.
tell you, when you made the statement of learning Arabic from the one brother that charged $5 an hour, but your Arabic or his English couldn't help you, move forward. Having that ability to have scholarship and people that can relate in the English language is of the utmost importance. I know for me, and we'll just, to move it forward a little bit, when I first started studying like the Maliki fiqh, there was very little translated literature, so and I'll be honest with you, between like Sheikh Hamza's, Yusuf's lectures and a lot of your lectures on Facebook, that was where, I just sat down with like you said, with that notebook and pencil and just started trying to understand, the Maliki fiqh. So it's like, that's why I said for me, this interview is very important. It's very special to me, because I've spent many hours just, combing through your fiqh lessons, that are online. So it's pretty amazing.
Sheikh, he's being a little modest. My husband's a bit of a nerd. He is an academic and a teacher at the Islamic school. He is a history mate, that he teaches history. So that when he says hours, he literally means hours. Alhamdulillah.
Right.
But the question that I wanted to ask you. So as you started getting into more Sunni Islam and you started learning, and subhanAllah, and we're going to get into your academic paralysis, like how did you then realize from where you were raised is from the Nation of Islam? How did you relate the two in regards to realizing, okay, when you started getting into the fiqh and the sciences and relating to, how you were raised, did you just, I know, or you said early on that you had a distinction between, no, like I'm Muslim, I'm this. How did you feel as you started seeing this whole world open up to, because you thought this whole time I'm Muslim, but now you're being introduced into, subhanallah, even a world that a lot of people don't dive into as they start studying. What were some of your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it really wasn't, I guess you'd say, anything life shattering, in the sense that I really didn't have any frame of reference, to be totally honest. In other words, my parents were members of the Nation of Islam. My elder siblings received a type of indoctrination, which I would say is a little bit more pro-Black than I myself have received. I really didn't have very strong Black consciousness, right? They have a much more, especially my oldest brother, a much stronger Black consciousness than I did, right, around this time. And so I really didn't have any frame of reference. To me, it was just like, okay, we're Muslims, right? And you say this is what it is. And now, of course, I knew about Malcolm X and the whole thing of him leaving the nation and making Hajj and all those other things, and that resonated with me naturally, right? Of course, and especially seeing, his speeches and those things, his fiery speeches, and really being impressed with him as an individual and his sincerity. Right. So it made it easy for me to sort of like continue to move in that direction. But it wasn't as if like I had some baggage that I had to sort of let go of. Right. And if anything, I'm probably much more Black conscious today than I was, when I was a teenager.
We're going to get into that. My husband's been studying you. We have some questions we're going to ask you, especially about your thesis. So.
Yeah, inshallah. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, inshallah. Looking forward to that. Okay.
So, okay. So let's move on to the work that you do. So you acquired this like traditional Islamic education, and so I'm assuming there were some difficulties, gaining this education. I'm assuming, being a African American male from Chicago, Philadelphia area, did you travel overseas to acquire them? Oh, you had to, because it says you graduated in Morocco. But when did you make that decision to say that I'm going to, really focus on this religious knowledge as compared to like secular knowledge?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I told the story a couple of times before, but not to too many people. But yeah, but at 1993, the Hajj of 1993 was a really major turning point for me because it was the very first time I'd ever been on an airplane, and also the first time I ever been out of the country, right? Of course, I've been out of the state because I lived in Chicago naturally, but I really had never traveled right anywhere, So it really gave me a better idea of just how big the world was, and I came in contact with a lot of people, who made me feel like the trip was a very spiritual trip for me. It was a very spiritual trip in a lot of different ways. I remember meeting this Senegalese brother in Egypt, who spoke to me for hours about things about Yom Qiyamah and about all these things. And, so I was very focused on that trip. I didn't take much with me in terms of luggage, and I had like a duffel bag. I had like a few changes of clothing. I bought some things when I was there, So for me, the study of Arabic and Islam, it was just something I liked doing. It wasn't like a thing where I just woke up one day and said, listen, I want to become a scholar. Right? That it didn't occur that way. It was just that I want to know what the Quran says. One of the things that led me to want to study more than just simply Arabic was, I remember one particular year, and again, this was the family who I was growing up with. Someone had said that, oh, if you go to Jummah, you don't have to pray Dhuhr afterwards. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. Go to Jummah, you don't have to pray Dhuhr. But then, like maybe a few months later, somebody said, oh, no, so-and-so said that if you go to Jummah, you have to pray Dhuhr afterwards too, right?
Yes.
So we shifted back to that, and then like a few months later, then they did the opposite again. And that made me realize at the moment, I said, you know what, I'll be like a leaf in the wind, right? If I could continue to listen to everybody. It was very frustrating to be at the mercy of people like that, right? So I said, I'm going to study the religion, right, on my own, right? That way, and hopefully I'll become a bit more independent in that sense. So basically, people started to push me in the direction. They saw that I was, had some talent, that I was picking up Arabic fairly easily compared to a lot of other people. Even people who had been studying Arabic for maybe a decade longer than I was, and I actually was doing a lot better than they were, right? And so certain people started to say, oh, we should go overseas, you go study. And I really wasn't interested in it. I just want to be able to know what Allah says and what His messenger said, open up a book of tafsir, things like that. So it was always someone else's idea about me going overseas. And then eventually in 1995, I believe, no, maybe 94, I said, so 93 Hajj and then maybe 94, I believe. In 94, I went and consulted some of my teachers, and they said, oh yeah, it'd be nice if you went to Saudi Arabia, to University of Medina. And I said, okay, let's do it. Then maybe a week went by, then they called me in the office and they said, well, Medina probably not the best place to go. People are a bit too ideological, they're closed-minded, and we want you to go to Azhar, go to Egypt. I said, okay, let's do it. Go to Egypt. Right. And then another week or so goes back, and then they shift back. It's all Egypt's really poor, Saudi Arabia is better, for this reason or that reason. I said, let's do it. Yeah, every time I'm just going with whatever they want to do. And then eventually, I had a conversation with some brothers, actually a little bit older than my teachers, who actually said, listen, you just got to choose. You got to make up your mind on where you want to go and everything. And once you make up your mind, just let us know. We buy a ticket for you. So these brothers, they bought me a one-way ticket to Egypt. I had not been accepted into Azhar University. My plan was to go to Azhar. I was going to go there, get off the plane, get on the taxi, and ask them to take me to Azhar University. And I was going to knock on the door. And when they opened up the door, I was going to say, I want to study. I come here to learn. Right? Okay. And that was it. Right. But the week leading up to my departure, I developed some type of stomach illness, right, where I couldn't keep my food down, right? And I didn't feel nervous, any anxiety at all, right? But my body reacted this way. And so Friday was my scheduled flight to leave. Thursday night, one of the original brothers who was advising me, encouraging me to go overseas, he came to me and he he brought me out to his car and he begged me not to go. He took about an hour to finally convince me to just, okay, I'm not going to go. Right. So I didn't. So that we squandered that ticket. Right. But I was a bit frustrated after that. I was very annoyed by it all, because I was saying to myself, well, this was your idea to begin with, and now you guys tell me not to go. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do. So I decided at that moment that I'm going to go. I'm going to register at Temple University. I'm going to get me a degree. I'm a major in computer science. And I'm gonna finish my degree, get me a good job, make some money, get married, make some babies, and that's it.
Okay.
And do this Arabic stuff on the side, right?
Mhm.
So I did that. I started Temple in '95, and I was focused in my first year in my computer science studies. And then in the second year, early, I think it was, I discovered the Arabic section of the library, right? And I started to look through all these books. I was just amazed at what was available. And Shafi'i this, and Jafar al-Sadiq, all these different books that I'd never seen before. And I would spend a lot of time looking through them. And eventually I started to fall behind in my computer science studies. At the time, I also was working as a security guard at a hospital in Philly. And I did the night shift. So one night, it just dawned on me that, you know what, even though you try to run away from this is what comes naturally for you. It seems like, you can excel in this, so you might as well go overseas if there's an opportunity, So I was at Temple. I was also taking some graduate level courses with Dr. Khalid Blankenship. And so I went to his office like the next day, and I said to him, I said, I think I'm going to go overseas. I think I'm really ready to go now. And so he was like, oh, well, okay. I think maybe you should go to Morocco. And I was like, well, Morocco, why? He says, well, there's a Qatari university there, those university, on the planet. And, we don't know anybody who studied there. So I think that's a good idea. And plus at the time, the king of Morocco at the time actually had invited Dr. Khalid, among other scholars from around the world, to his Ramadan lectures that he would have them deliver in his presence, right? So people in Morocco knew Dr. Khalid Blankenship. And so in the summer of 1997, I took a two-week visit to Morocco to go see what things look like, visit university, visit another school as well in a different city, just to see if that might be something I'm looking for as well. And I also visited the government office, right? That they call the Katib al-Am, the general secretary, who was actually would authorize my visa to actually come.
Let me ask you, Shay. So, because we want to move you forward, I really want to get into some of your works.
Yeah.
So at this point, I know we read the bio, but can you remind us? So, what are your degrees in, inshallah?
Oh yeah, well, my degree from Morocco is in Sharia, Islamic law, and I have a master's in ethics and social theory, and then I have a PhD in cultural and historical studies and religion.
So you did realize. So when did you realize you turn around? Okay, I am a scholar now.
Well,
I never had the intention.
Well, I don't think I ever really completely said that, but of course, naturally, you can only be so humble, right? But I definitely didn't feel I was a scholar when I finished my first degree, right? I felt, and I realized it at the time too, that I knew how to become a scholar, right? But that was a combination of things. It's not only what I studied there, but also the people I studied with in the past, right? The Khalid Blankenship, Sheikh Anwar, and others, right? All of those were part of my scholarship, right? My upbringing, my educational sort of formation. But it really
and you're with Zaytuna right now and Lamppost, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I teach my full-time job is Zaytuna, and so Lamppost is the organization that I co-founded with Brother Khalil Mahsen. I don't know. I think he may be on the call today, but
okay.
But yeah. But my full-time teaching position is at Zaytuna College. So basically, it was only after I taught for a number of years and I did a lot of translating and things like that where I actually would say that I felt like a scholar. It wasn't like when I finished the schools. It was actually after I started teaching, right, and writing, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we were doing our research and I know a lot of the Maliki fiqh, but recently you have really been touching on a lot of, well, I'm not even going to say recently, more a lot of difficult subjects, that it seems as though a lot of Muslim leaders kind of shy away from, and I was amazed and pleased to see, that you're working, I'm not going to say talking out against, but you're working to get people to understand, this issue of, anti-Blackness in the Muslim community here in America. I know your thesis title is "The Negro and the Afro-Arabian Muslim Consciousness," and it said on a bio that I was reading that of your studies, one of your focuses, it says race and Blackness studies in Muslim history. So can you kind of give us a little, expound upon the work that you're doing, about race relations in the United States? Because one of the reasons why my wife and I, mainly her than me, we started this is that we want to explain and show that, our foreign-born brothers and sisters, that Islam is viable in America. It's been here for a very long time, and it seems as though a lot of our brothers might not understand that. I don't, so can you just expound upon the work that you're doing, about race relations in Islam in America?
Yeah, well, my focus is actually largely if you talk about my dissertation, that was primarily focused on Islamic history, sort of contextualizing the Negro in the Arab context, in the African context, in particular on the basis of the material that the literature itself that existed, from the back towards the medieval period until the turn of the 19th century into the, of course, the 20th century. But of course, I didn't handle all of that, but to some extent, I did try to touch on some overlap which extends for multiple centuries. With regard to like race relations today and the masjid and in our community overall, that also has been a concern of mine. Of course, it has been, but not in the probably not in the sense that a lot of people think that I pay it that much attention. We used to have what is called the Black American Muslim Conference. We have organized a few of those prior to COVID. Well, actually a couple before, and then one during the first year of COVID, the online version of it, right? And one of the goals of that was to try to raise awareness, not only among our own people, but among non-Blacks, that there's a unique perspective, unique social and cultural perspective, that African Americans have that is being lost as a result of the mainstream view of Islam being now sort of steered by the national organizations, which are largely controlled by, we call it, immigrants, right? So like for some people, as you say, like I agree that there's certain Muslims who still feel that, okay, that Islam is not something viable for America or for the United States. But you're probably talking about an extreme minority now. At this point, among the quote unquote immigrant populations, if anything, they themselves have actually perhaps going much further than they should have when it comes to integration into the American mainstream, right? And I think politics has probably been the worst decision. Becoming involved in politics has probably been the worst decision that our community has made nationally at this point, considering the moral decay and depravity that is being embraced by Muslim politicians, And a lot of mainstream organizations, Muslim organizations themselves are either endorsing the depravity or at least condoning it. They're not making any highlighting that there's potential harm to come from, you know, this embrace of leftism, the embrace of progressive politics, right? So for me, the issue is not so much that. I mean, you can find multiple quote unquote immigrant organizations around the country who will, you know, support Black efforts. They definitely will, you know, with their money even, right? But it's usually on the same terms that what Malcolm called the white liberal sort of would dictate, you know, that in other words, you know, first they have to find a real Black person, you know, which in their minds is an individual, you know, it's poor, helpless, you know, sort of constantly complaining about how oppressed he is or she is.
Down and out.
Right, exactly. You know, but no one's really independent, has his own mind, you know, so head on his shoulders, is not confident. You know, those type of people are not the type of individuals that they see, unfortunately, as real Black people, or at least an authentic type of Black person, right? So there definitely are some problems there, which we need to continue to hammer home to many Muslims in this particular regard. And so you don't have to take sides in Democrat, Republican sort of politics, right? You know, the political sort of tug of war. You don't have to take sides. You know, you basically all you need to do is to look out for your interests, you know, and wherever your interests are most protected, you know, you can sort of like move in that direction, right? Or at least.
Well, let me back you up some. At the earlier on in the conversation, you know, you said your love, you hadn't developed a Black consciousness. So I think I want to ask you, when did you or how did you come about it? Because obviously with covering certain materials and having a shift, and even, you know, your initiative in your conversations and watching your lectures, that did happen. So how and why did that happen?
Well, I think it was a combination. That was a combination of my friend Luqman Williams, Allah yarhamu, who passed away a few years ago.
He was a close family friend as well.
Oh, really? SubhanAllah.
Yeah. You probably know my brother Brahim Bakr.
Well, yeah. You know what? I saw your name and I said Shaheed Bakr. That still looks like Brahim Bakr. I said, oh,
the two of them were. Yeah, he says that's his older brother. May Allah be pleased with him.
I mean, yeah. I was with him a couple of weeks before he passed, and mashallah, you know, it's but Brother Luqman, you know, he really worked on me, right? You know, to I guess you'd say to try to get me to at least consider a certain type of evil that perhaps that I was unwilling to open my eyes to, right? You know, for a short bit of time, right? You know, not that I really resisted that much. It's just that I always felt that sometimes Luqman, Allah show him mercy, that he seemed a little bit more abrasive than I felt that he needed to be, you know, towards white people in certain regards, right?
The ghetto nomad.
Right. So, but again, it was that, and then actually the other thing was with, you know, like my friend Brother Khalil, right? It's another one. Brother Khalil, he actually did grow up in the nation and did have the training, went through the process of, you know, learning and studying a lot of the books, you know, the great Black thinkers, and, you know, and so not that my parents weren't encouraging me to read some of those books. A lot of the books I really didn't take seriously at the time. I really was interested in reading certain books, and perhaps it had a lot to do with the fact that I didn't see discrimination to the extent that they themselves had experienced at the time, you know, or didn't see like the value of those things there. But you know, so you turn me on to people like Harold Cruz, you know, the crisis of the Negro intellectual, and C. Eric Lincoln, and the rise of the Black bourgeoisie, things like that. So you have this different Carter G. Woodson, different authors like that, and
so that opened you up.
Booker T.
So then being a scholar and being in the room, now, what is that like, and how do you influence those? Because even, oftentimes still we see, when there are these large conferences, and this is one that I had, seen from you in 2016, and I titled it, "You Belong." The weekend I was happy to attend an independent meeting of American scholars. Major issues facing the community were discussed in an environment of respect, appreciation, and introspect. We benefited from each other's advice, insight, and experience. And looking at this picture, and I often see when I see, scholars like this in a room, it's, very few of us, sometimes. And so as you've been traveling throughout the world, what is that like? How do you then use that same Black consciousness now to bring it forward? And are you to have those conversations? Because what happens there really does, it has a culture in which it, permeates into many of the different masjids, the large masjids that we deal with, or the organizations. Are you able to have those like real talk conversations?
Yeah, well, I'm always about real talk. Everybody knows me. I'm all about real talk. And I for me, I guess I would say that my Black consciousness is not. It's not. It's not really. Well, let me sort of rephrase. Like, Blacks have never really been like a uniform people ideologically, right? We've never been uniform, and I think that this is one of our mistakes that we've made. And when you study the great authors, the great scholars of the Black, civil rights tradition, that you see that right away, right? One of the points that Harold Cruz makes is that, that there were just two basic paradigms that we've had since the Emancipation Proclamation, or since the Emancipation and Civil War, which is that you had the integrationist paradigm, and then you had the separatist nationalist paradigm. For the most part, the integrationist paradigm, it won over, right, most Blacks, right? But the separatist national paradigm, was what was represented by the Nation of Islam. And to an extent, you can see like there was, Nation of Islam probably was at least under the first resurrection, we would call it, was probably the most successful Black movement, that we've seen in American history, right? When people actually decided, do for self, don't, put your hand out to the white man and be dependent, stand up on your own feet. Don't rely on other people, right? So, and that's really where I am when I start talking. My own Black consciousness is that it's more like a Booker T. Washington type of consciousness, as opposed to, well, I don't want to say Du Bois. Du Bois is actually more of like a, he was able to merge the two of them, and eventually, right? But basically. I don't get bent out of shape, right, when I don't see Black representation, you understand, in the way that most people in society say, like, oh my God, where are the Black people, right? I don't get bent out of shape about that. For me, it's like, if you're choosing me, if you invite me because I have value and I have talent, then I want to be there. I don't want to be invited if I don't have talent. Right, I don't want it to be perceived that I'm only there simply because of like tokenism, right?
Yes.
I don't. That's not what I want to be here. Right? Sort of identified with is tokenism. So I don't have a problem with all male panels. I don't have a problem with all female panels. I don't have a problem with all white or all Black, right? Panels. None of it really bothers me. Unless, of course, we find out that the only reason that people are being excluded is because of their sex or because of their race or things like those type of things, when actually there are people who actually can contribute great things, right? Naturally, we would raise issue with that. But I'm not going to raise an issue simply because, oh, there are not enough Black people or there are not enough women there, those type of things. And I just think that is counterproductive, and it basically just it promotes tokenism, and it actually keeps us stuck in a type of situation where people see us as not there because we deserve to be there, right? But we're there because of some political decision, because of PR, right? And
like an
that's a good
affirmative
point.
action type of mentality.
yeah, was that?
Yeah. So that's a good point. So I'll bring it home a little bit more, I guess, to our area, because all the different demographics are, different.
Mhm.
And so then maybe you could give advice then.
Mhm.
So in our area, we actually don't have a large African-American community. It was so funny. Mam Siraj was here,
Mhm.
and somebody from the audience had asked him, I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, but it was kind of like, how do you get, how do you get, to see you, how do you know, work with them, or how do you get them to see your issues? And he said, invite them to the Black Masjid. What's so funny is that in New York that's probably quite common. So for him that was something that would have been relevant. Just invite them in. But if you have an environment where there's not, so the representation, I guess, even matters probably even more, because if all of these spaces you're not represented, what then would be the advice, to, I guess, for those who are in that kind of environment, and then maybe even advice to leaders who are over those environments, because you're right, you don't want to be the token, but at the same time,
Well, I mean, if your needs are not being addressed, right, in the particular institution you attend,
Yeah.
then you may need to, of course, bring that up. And if brought up, if it's ignored, then you may need to find a way to create, I guess you would say, a project, that addresses that need, either through the masjid or through, some other institution, right? Perhaps even start your own institution, right? Or just start your own effort, right? Maybe you can continue to go to the masjid, but this is your effort. But I think it's unhealthy.
That's the African American Muslim Alliance of Tampa Bay.
Right, yeah, alhamdulillah, yeah. And alhamdulillah, may Allah give you all success in that, and I think of course, it's important for us to correct our intentions, right? And it's easy for us to be reactionary, right?
Yeah.
In other words, to say, well, I'm starting this because they're not providing something for us, and you're just doing it, you're resentful, right, in the process of doing it. Rather, listen, that's their thing, right? And they're addressing their needs. and I respect that, right?
Yeah.
We're going to address our needs, and when we can find common ground, let's come together, right? You see, and I just think that that's more healthy and more in line with a prophetic ethos or Islamic ethos. Right? It's the Prophet ﷺ, one of the things he did was that he eliminated from the minds of the Arabs, at least his closest followers, this idea that their bloodline made them superior to other people. That it's not about who your daddy is, right? So you could talk about your daddy, your granddaddy, those stuff. The Prophet, no, that your iman, your faith, right? This is actually a stronger bond than the bonds of blood, right? So he did that. So he caused a revolution, right, in Arab thinking, in Arab society, right? And that particular sort of thinking is one I believe that he wanted all of us to continue to have, but not to negate or deny where we come from, or to deny what our roots and our ethnicity, those type of things, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he's the one who made us into different groups and different tribes, different.
I always say that.
Different people,
Alhamdulillah.
so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't consider it to be a bad thing that we are different or distinct in certain ways. It's just that when we do come together, we have to understand that where true value lies, right, in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And realistically, our religion is more of a religion of meritocracy than anything else, right? Not complete meritocracy, but for the most part, we're talking about meritocracy, where your moral integrity means something. Your relative knowledge and expertise, it means something, right? About whether or not you're going to hold office or hold a position, right? It's not really based upon, okay, your Arabness or your Africanness or your Europeanness.
Yeah.
This is really what is promoted in our religion, right? So, right. So that's the ideal, right? And we're going to struggle along that path, and dealing with people is frustrating, right? Dealing with people is frustrating. So we have to learn to be patient with one another and understand that change doesn't come easy, especially when you're talking about deeply ingrained creedal and cultural assumptions and ideas which have been formulated over generations, or even over decades of one person's life, right? Those are things that are not easy to break, right, for anyone, right? So
SubhanAllah. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We're Shahid and I were talking about this today. We went on our date, and so for us, our date would be going to a history museum, alhamdulillah, because she loves history, of course. So, but we were looking at the different artifacts and things like that, and it was interesting. We both said until we moved here, it was never, like, oh, I need to be Black. I need to talk about my Blackness, Black, like it wasn't like the hoteps. That was never, because in our environments, we're Muslim,
right.
And so, we were talking about how it's frustrating because you don't want to be known, or you don't want people to think that, your deen is about, being Black, because you don't, Black to Black, but you see an injustice or biases that you end up having to address. Right. And so always having to be the whistleblower, it makes it like that. But I always say, like, I was Muslim before I'm Muslim, Right. And so that is I appreciate you speaking to that, because it is, a complex issue, I have one question. A few of the local leaders are supposed to speak at a Islamic school coming up this next week. And the principal asked us to talk about the N-word, right? Because there's been an influx of the students, which are predominantly, Arab, Desi, and Indo-Pak, using this word. And what advice would you give, to parents or even, students that are listening, like, about using the N-word?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult one, because the question is, it demands from me to assume that I know why students are saying it and they're using it, right? Now, the reason I bring that up is, I mean, some kids, hey, it's hip hop. Everybody's saying it. It's cool. It makes you cool if you're saying it. I understand. Even young Arab kids and and Desi kids.
I have two answers for you. So one is to answer, because we asked that question in investigating how do we address it, and one answer was, were they saying it was because of hip hop? Two was because my Black friend gave me permission to say it.
Yeah.
And then three is you just hear it.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's clearly the word is not as hurtful to most Black people as it would have been for people under oppression, right? And we don't live under the type of oppression that existed in the 60s and before that, right? So I mean, Black people use it all the time, right? In hip hop and in other contexts, and maybe we do it even from time to time, right? But I guess, I mean, there needs to be, some campaign to try to make people understand, just how demeaning of a word that can be for many people, right? But the idea that every time I hear somebody who's white in particular, right, use the N-word, then I'm gonna all of a sudden I turn into a snowflake or I fall to pieces. Why am I falling to pieces when a white person says it, right? And the only reason I can think of is that there's a love-hate relationship there. That on one level you hate white people, and on another level you actually love them. You want them to accept you, right? And it means more when they say it because, again, you want them to love you, right? Right? Had it not been them who said it, right? Would you have the same reaction? Let's say, for instance, you probably have a similar reaction. If it was an Arab that calls you the N-word, or Indian or Pakistani person calls you the N-word, you may have similar reaction, but I'm not sure if we have the same reaction if it's a white person, right? So. But in other words, we know the people who actually are trying to hurt our feelings, when they use those terms.
This is at the Islamic School. I don't know if I made that clear. I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, I think you did. I think you mentioned you did. And again, the reason I'm struggling with this is because I do know that this newer generations, they're just they're totally disconnected from a lot of those different things, and they. Many of them actually transcend race, right? They don't see it. I've seen rap songs, where like white boys saying N-word and everything, and he's standing next to a bunch of black boys. And they like, cool. He want us, right? So that's what many of them actually are seeing. But on the other hand, you have some of them as well who actually are being indoctrinated into progressive politics, where they're being taught that every black person is like this, this icicle, right? Put a little bit of heat on him that he melts when you say the N-word, and and they go a little bit too far, hyper defensive of us, right? And so it's not an easy one to deal with it. I guess we can just, to me, I guess all I can say is that we should not use it, right? We should try our best to educate them about the history of the word, right? And how hurtful it was. And it is for still many people, right? To hear it, right? See, and even though there's some black people who are fine with it, there are a lot of people who are not fine with it, right? Here's a story. I used to live with a white British Muslim guy when I was in Morocco. And we would joke around quite a bit. And he would call me the N-word. I'll call him some white slurs and things like that. We was all in fun, fun and games. We lived together for like 4 months, so. And he's a younger guy, right? And so one day we're out in a restaurant outside, and then there was another black guy with us from the U.S. And he went to joke with him like the way he joked with me. And I was like, hold on, man, listen. I said, no, listen. You can joke with me, but you can't. You don't get it twisted, right? Yeah, I'm okay. I got alligator skin and everything, and I understand, because you're my little brother, right? I let you get away with it, But don't joke around with other people when it comes to that. You see, and so it's
individual relationships.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess again,
it's definitely it's a tough discussion. And that's kind of where we're trying to get a little insight, because it is and not to make the conversation all about that, but it's a tough discussion.
It's tough, and at the same time it's not, to be totally honest, right? Because on one level they say, well, Islam, what does Islam tell you? Don't call people by negative nicknames. Don't give them negative names and titles.
Yes.
Period. That's Islamic teaching, and that might solve it, right? It could be simple as that. So we don't do this because Allah told us not to call people by offensive nicknames, even if they say they like it. No, we're not supposed to do it. Right? You see, maybe one day maybe one day they don't like it. Maybe they're okay with it today, but maybe tomorrow they have an awakening, and then they, I don't like that anymore. It's don't do it. On the other hand, we have all these cultural dynamics, which makes it a challenge where you have, again, rappers. I know the documentary made about Richard Pryor a few years, 4 or 5 years ago. I remember seeing everybody was talking about he's my N, he's my, so is there a difference between the ER and the A, and so all these hip hoppers, and some of them are Muslims too, was like they were celebrating using the N word. Right? So this is what complicates the issue.
Yes, definitely.
Alhamdulillah.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to talk about, just briefly before we end here, just some of the work that you've been doing, which, I mean, like I said, I've benefited from it immensely, so I did watch when you were on the Black Imams Roundtable. That was a pleasure to listen to the discussion that you had with those different imams. I actually do teach a Maliki Fit course for fasting before Ramadan. And the text and the lectures that we used were your lectures for the Maliki Fiqh to teach, the little, my family members and everyone, just all of the different points. So just a couple of pictures of the work that you do. Before we end, are there any, because I'm just now doing the research for this interview, I saw all of the lectures and the articles that you've written in the response to the homosexuality, to the gender issues, to the race issues. So I'm excited to go into those lectures and go into those articles and read those points. Is there any literature that you're working on right now?
Yeah, I'm always working on something.
Okay.
I'm working on a translation. It's already done to an extent. I need to write an introduction to it. It's a forthcoming work entitled, translated, it'll probably be called "There is No Male Preference in Islamic Law." Right.
Okay.
So it was a book that was written by one of my teachers. Right. And basically he showed and demonstrated that, contrary to conventional wisdom, that if we were to compare, right, the rights of women to those of men, right, and then also the situations where women, female scholars, came out in support of the male position and vice versa, right, that you have a totally different perspective on why it seems that Islam is sort of like tilted in the direction or in favor of men as opposed to in the favor of women, right? And you probably have much more reason to feel the opposite, right, about this, right? So this is a book, inshallah. Hopefully we'll have it out later this year, maybe in a few months from now. I have a lot of other work that I'm doing. I have few projects with Zaytuna at the moment, for Ramadan, that I've been working on. So that's why I haven't finished the book off for Lamppost.
We pray that Allah gives you success in those endeavors.
Inshallah.
I mean,
Allah give you all success in what you're doing. Yeah.
I mean, it's starting to grow, and you being here is a testament of that. So thank you very much. So I'm gonna give, if I may, the honor of giving dua to end the class. I'm gonna give it to you if you finish this up.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa sayyidil mursalin nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allah, please forgive us and guide us. Make us among those who follow your guidance and the guidance of your Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. Grant us success in this life and the hereafter. Allow our works and our projects to be successful and to serve those members of the community who need it the most, and to grant us well-being in our health and in our faith, and protect us and our children, our families from all harms, both physical and spiritual. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذريتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا اجعلنا مقيم الصلاة ومن ذريتنا ربنا وتقبل دعاء. ربنا اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. ربنا وأنزلنا منزلا مباركا وأنت خير المنزلين. مع الذين أنعمت عليهم من النبيين والصديقين والشهداء والصالحين وحسن أولئك رفيقا وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Inshallah, on this same Zoom channel tomorrow, we will have at 7 o'clock. Tomorrow's guest is, who do we have tomorrow, babe?
It's Sister Sauda. She is one of the founders of fraternities of the prison out there. What is it? I'm drawing a blank. We've been talking about Attica so much.
Okay. What was it? The Fraternal Order of Police, if I believe you said it was.
Can I jump in to help you out with that?
Yes. Yeah, please, Layla, help me.
Yes, it's the guest tomorrow night will be Sauda. She took over the reins of, we started the ICLEO, which was the first law enforcement fraternal organization in Rikers Island. We brought in all the other agencies and we gave the keys to her and she took over the reign and excelled the program. So she's a very dynamic sister. Inshallah, tune in. She's sharp.
7 o'clock tomorrow. So thank you, Sheikh. Thank you for being here with us. I pray that you guys have success and inshallah, we will see you guys tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.